All right, today is going to be the first day that we are diving into Africa, and today we're going to start talking about the physical geography, basically landforms and resources of Africa. So, by the end of today, kind of the main ideas for section one, we are going to be looking at the large plateaus that cover most of Africa. We'll also talk about Africa's natural resources that made it appealing to European colonizers. Before I get started, I want to read you a human's perspective. It says Angola's rebel leader, Jonas Samvibi, kept his forces fighting by bargaining with arms dealers and haggling with international diamond traders. Diamonds, one of the world's most precious and valuable gems, have enriched some of Africa's countries, including Botswana and South Africa. However, in other diamond rich countries such as Angola, people use diamonds to fund costly and bloody civil wars. Rebel groups in Angola and the Angolan government sold diamonds on the world market and then used the money from the sale to buy weapons. The sale of diamonds funded a war that killed more than 500,000 people. Angolans and have left more than the war left more than 4 million Angolans homeless as well. So a country's or continent's resources are used for a whole variety of purposes, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, first slide. Now, Africa's shape and landforms are the result of its location in the southern part of the ancient supercontinent of Pangaea. We read about that way back in Chapter 2 in Western Geography. About 200 million years ago, Pangaea began to break up, and over thousands of years, North and South America, Antarctica, Australia, and India all drifted into their current positions. Present-day Africa, however, has moved very little. A huge plateau covers most of Africa, and it raises inland from narrow lowlands along the coast. Except for the coasts of Mozambique and Somalia, much of the continent lies at least 1,000 feet above sea level. This plateau is Africa's most prominent physical feature, and as a result, geographers sometimes refer to Africa, the world's second largest continent, as the plateau continent. Throughout this plateau lie several huge basins, or depressions, which you'll notice on the map if you look in your book on page 415. Each basin spans more than 625 miles across and is as much as 5,000 feet deep. Water collects in the Chad Basin and rivers flow through Sudan, Congo, and Juf basins. The world's longest river, the Nile River, also flows more than 4,000 miles through Uganda and Sudan into Egypt. It can be found in Africa. Its waters have provided irrigation for the region for thousands of years, and more than 95% of Egyptians depend on the Nile for their water. In fact, the average population density along the Nile is more than 3,320 people per square mile. Compare that to the average population density of 177 people per square mile in all of Egypt. Africa's rivers contain many waterfalls, rapids, and gorges, and these features make the rivers less useful for transportation than shorter rivers on other continents. The 2,900-mile-long Congo River forms the continent's largest network of waterways, but a series of 32 cataracts or waterfalls makes large portions of that river impassable. Furthermore, meandering courses also make Africa's rivers difficult to use for transportation. For example, the Niger River begins in West Africa and flows north toward the Sahara, where it forms an interior delta and turns into the southeast. It then cuts through Nigeria and forms another huge delta as it empties into the Gulf of Guinea. Africa does not have a long chain of mountains, such as the Rocky Mountains in North America or the Himalayas in Asia. However, Africa's valleys and lakes add to the continent's varied landscape. The continent's most distinctive landforms are in East Africa. As the continental plates pulled apart over millions of years, huge cracks appeared in the earth. The land then sank to form long, thin valleys called rift valleys. The rift valleys show that the eastern part of Africa is actually pulling away from the rest of Africa. These rift valleys stretch over 4,000 miles from Jordan in southwest Asia to Mozambique in southern Africa. A cluster of lakes form at the bottoms of some of these rift valleys, and these African lakes are unusually long and deep. Lake Tanganyika, the longest freshwater lake in the world, stretches about 420 miles and reaches a depth of more than 4,700 feet. However, Africa's largest lake, Lake Victoria, sits in a shallow basin between two rift valleys. It is the world's second largest freshwater lake, but is only 270 feet deep. Alongside the rivers and lakes, Africa also contains many volcanic mountains. Mount Kenya and Mount Kilimanjaro, Africa's highest mountain, are both volcanoes. Volcanic activity also produced the Ethiopian highlands, the Tibesti Mountains in the Sahara, and Mount Cameroon in West Africa. In addition, volcanic rock covers the Great Escarpment in southern Africa. An escarpment, by definition, is a steep slope with a nearly flat plateau on top. The Great Escarpment marks the edge of the continent's plateau in southern Africa. The story of Africa's natural resources is at once a story of plenty and one of scarcity. Africa has a huge amount of the world's minerals, but many African countries lack the industrial base and money to develop them. Africa's minerals make it one of the world's richest continents. African nations contain large amounts of gold, platinum, chromium, cobalt, copper, phosphates, diamonds, and many other materials. For example, South Africa is the world's largest producer of chromium. Chromium is an element used in manufacturing stainless steel. South Africa also produces nearly 80% of the world's platinum and nearly 30% of the world's gold. Another important resource, cobalt, is used in high-grade steel for aircraft and industrial engines. African nations produce about 42% of the world's cobalt, mostly from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Zambia. Ores and minerals account for more than half the total value of Africa's exports. Africa's great mineral wealth, however, has not meant economic prosperity for its population. In the 19th and 20th centuries, European colonial rulers developed Africa's natural resources for export to Europe to manufacture goods there. As a result, many African nations have been slow to develop the infrastructure and industries that could turn these resources into valuable products. The countries of Libya, Nigeria, and Algeria are among the world's leading petroleum producers. Other countries such as Angola and Gabon have huge untapped oil reserves. Libya, Nigeria, Algeria, and Angola continue to produce over 7% of the world's oil. Angola illustrates why valuable resources don't always benefit most Africans. Recently discovered offshore oil deposits will likely enable Angola to surpass Nigeria as Africa's most oil-rich country. American oil companies pay Angola a fee for drilling rights and the oil. However, the Angolan government spends the money on an ongoing civil war. This war is caused in part by ethnic divisions resulting from years of colonialism. Angola invests very little money in schools, hospitals, or other public infrastructure. And when you look on this map here on the right side of this slide, you can see what each country is known for around Africa. So you can see lots of pink mineral resources, gold, diamonds. The orange are iron ore, uranium, and you can see oil spread throughout Africa, or natural gas in the dark gray. And then obviously the green ones are coffee and tea. So they're kind of known for all kinds of different things around Africa, but just a very interesting map nonetheless. Now, from rainforests to roaring rivers, Africa possesses an incredible diversity of resources. After oil, coffee is the most profitable commodity in Africa, and even though few Africans drink coffee, the continent grows 20% of the world's supply. Lumber is another important commodity. Nigeria leads African nations in lumber exports and ranks 8th worldwide in that area. However, logging is depleting Africa's forests, and every year loggers clear an area of land in Africa about twice the size of New Jersey. Other major commodities include sugar, palm oil, and cocoa. Côte d'Ivoire is the world's largest exporter of cocoa beans, the main ingredient in chocolate. Agriculture is the single most important economic activity in Africa. About 66% of Africans earn their living from farming. In addition, farm products account for nearly 1/3 of the continent's exports. Farmers benefit from Africa's climate, which is going to be the main focus that we will talk about later with Section 2.